man is scarlet and gray.
The man is scarlet and gray.
Yeah.
Let's go.
The man is scarlet and gray. What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rocking with
The
hard?
man is scarlet and gray.
Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for
The
love?
man is scarlet and gray.
What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rocking with
The
hard?
man is scarlet and gray.
Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for
The man
love?
is scarlet and gray.
It's time for it. You ready for it? It's MotSaG. You better know it. It's Gold Bucks. Every time. Hating on us, you better get in line.
The undisputed source of Ohio State commentary. This is the Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Here's Shannon Summers, Chip Minnich, and Jeremiah Sharp.
The man is scarlet and gray.
It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, doesn't it? It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
Buckeye Nation, welcome in another edition of Men in Scarlet and Gray here on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V-Sporto channel, bringing you all Buckeyes all the time. I'm Shannon Summers from MenInScarletandGray.com, and I'm joined by fellow MotSaG member Chip Minnich. Today, as we get ready for the Virginia Tech game, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Dwight Lester of FightingGobbler.com. We should have another great show for you as we discuss the Virginia Tech game with Dwight. We also give our predictions, along with some of the other big games for this weekend. Chip and I also talk about Tim Beckman firing, Noah Brown injury, along with the Buckeye captains. But before we get into it, we want to remind you to download the Buckeye Sports Radio's iOS and, as of today, hopefully, the Android app on Google Play. I'm very excited to finally have the Android app on my Note 4, so I can listen about the Buckeyes all the time. All right, first we want to welcome to the show Dwight Lester of thefightinggobbler.com. Welcome to our show, Dwight.
Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
And we have Chip here with us today. How are you doing today, Chip?
Doing very well, Shannon. And Dwight, I want to echo Shannon's introduction and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
All right, we're going to let's discuss the big game of the week, the Monday night NFL game, Ohio State versus Virginia Tech. You want to go ahead and break some of it down for us, Dwight?
Well, I mean, it feels like an NFL game, but I guess that, it is a huge revenge game for you guys, considering we are the only team to blemish your national championship record. The game is played in Blacksburg, which I don't know, are either of you planning on making the trip down?
Unfortunately, no.
The game is Blacksburg is a magical place at night. Just odd things seem to happen. It's just, for some reason, the Hokies seem to play completely out of their minds when the lights come on in Blacksburg. I mean, you can go back as far back as when Miami came into town. Miami used to be like when they were the top 5 teams in the country, they'd always come to Blacksburg and somehow they'd always stub their toe. We would be completely unranked, 21-point underdogs, and somehow we'd win the game. Let's be honest. I don't know if I think that's going to happen this year or not, but.
But then you guys go to lose to lesser teams and stuff. So
that is the big thing. That's why the next week's game against Furman, I wouldn't be surprised if we lost that game at all. All Hokie fans remember James Madison a couple years ago. So
I actually do have a question for Blacksburg, and I'm saying this with a touch of humor. Wasn't it a Virginia Tech game at night when Lee Corso's car was struck by lightning?
It was. I was actually at that game. My family's had season tickets since I can remember. I went to my first Virginia Tech game when I was 4 years old. That game was actually, it was the It was a first time that they actually had like one of the preseason games where different conferences played against each other. We played Georgia Tech, and it was a night game, and Lee Corso was dogging us the whole pregame, and they had probably one of the worst thunderstorms I've ever seen in my entire life, and lightning struck his rental car, and it was really funny because the next year he came to Blacksburg, and they had short shirts made up, about his car getting struck by lightning, and his famous quote is that he didn't know what a Hokie was, but God must be one of them because lightning struck his car.
Outstanding.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, I mean the environment is outrageous. I mean, I've never been to the Shoe. I hear it's one of the loudest places in college football, but I mean I would put Lane Stadium up there with any place in America. I mean when Enter Sandman hits, that place loses its mind. I mean I'd even read something this week that Urban Meyer had been pumping in Enter Sandman into practices to get Ohio State ready for the environment that they would be walking into.
What's the history behind Enter Sandman?
Well, actually, it started out that they wanted a pregame. We just got a brand new video board. This happened roughly, probably I think it was 12 years ago. They got a brand new video board, and they wanted a video package for when the team ran out of the tunnel, and they wanted a good song to run out to. And originally it was supposed to be "Welcome to the Jungle," but somehow they didn't think it fit with the video package, and somehow they just came up with Enter Sandman. The people that were doing the package believed it would work better, and when that chord hit, all of a sudden the Marching Virginians, which is our band, they're sitting right next to where the team runs out, they just started jumping up and down, and the student section is right behind them and over to the side of them, and they just mimicked it. And, it just caught wildfire from then. I mean, one of the most famous clips on YouTube is the Thursday night game against Miami when it was the first Maroon effect, and it's just a sea of orange and maroon just jumping up and down with Enter Sandman. And if you're in the top of the stadium, it feels like the stadium is moving.
You are listening to Men in Scarlet and Gray on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V Sporto channel. Buckeye fans, you know there isn't a better way to spend your Saturday than being at the Shoe. From the tailgating, skull sessions, the best damn band in the land doing Script, Ohio. You want to be in that sea of scarlet, don't you? When you start looking for tickets, you've got to check out the SeatGeek app. It's the best way for fans to save money on Buckeye football tickets, and it's a free service. The SeatGeek app aggregates tickets from every major ticket site online and puts it in one place, like Kayak.com. There's really no better way to find your Buckeye football tickets this season. I use the SeatGeek app to purchase Cleveland Indian homeowner tickets and saved enough money to buy tickets for the whole series. SeatGeek has a technology called Deal Score that calculates what every ticket in a building is worth, allowing you to save the most money. No other ticketing app has features like this. To redeem your promo code and save $20 on tickets, download the free SeatGeek app and enter promo code BUCKS in the app. SeatGeek will then send you $20 once you've made your first SeatGeek purchase. Download the free SeatGeek app and enter promo code BUCKS today. The SeatGeek app is your ticket to Buckeye football tickets.
But it's a completely different experience. I'm really sad that y'all guys are not going to get to experience it. But
well, I had the good fortune of meeting some Virginia Tech students last year prior to the Ohio State Virginia Tech game. So I was actually in attendance in Ohio Stadium to watch Virginia Tech completely dismantle Ohio State offensively in every way, shape, and form. I guess the question I have is for the Ohio State fans that listen to our podcast is, are there any, I don't want to encourage anyone to go into, places of ill repute per se, but are there any recommendations that you have on, any attractions that maybe within Blacksburg that Ohio State fans would feel welcome at in Blacksburg?
Usually, I mean, we're not, I say this being as nice as possible, we're not like SEC schools in the South. We don't shun fans from other schools. I mean, unless you are UVA fans, which I mean, y'all feel the same way about Michigan fans. But we generally welcome everybody. Blacksburg is really a friendly town, and it is a huge college football town. Blacksburg is home to Virginia Tech. In the summertime, when school is in session, there's roughly 50-some thousand people in Blacksburg, 50 to 60,000 people. When in the summertime, when school's not in session, the population drops down to probably right around 20,000, a little under 20,000. I mean, that Blacksburg is Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech is Blacksburg. You won't find anybody. I mean, of course, you're going to find like some people. They're going to, everybody pokes fun and good. It'll be a good fun. We'll be like, how's one loss? How'd that one loss happen? I mean, because to be honest with you, fellas, last year I said if we would keep this game within 28 points, I would be happy. Because coming into the game last year, we had a brand new quarterback that was transferred in, Michael Brewer. We didn't know exactly what we were going to get out of him. We had 2 brand new running backs that were true freshmen each. We didn't know exactly what we were going to get out of either one of them. I mean, in the first game of the season, they looked great, but our first game of the season, like yours, was a cupcake. I mean, you don't exactly know what you're going to get until you face stiff competition. Our offensive line was a patchwork. The only thing that Virginia Tech can hang their hat on every year consistently is our defense. And we knew that, we had the defensive capability to run with you guys, but at the same time, we didn't know, none of us foresaw, our defense being able to shut down an offense as powerful as Urban Meyer's offense that well. I mean, if you'd have told me we'd had 7 sacks and 3 interceptions, I'd have told you were crazy, and I'd said, where do I sign up to bet you money?
I was going to say, it's funny that you mentioned that because I think it was just mentioned that if that bear front wouldn't have worked, that they had no idea how to stop anything. And after watching the Virginia Tech William and Mary game, I came across as like Virginia Tech was kind of, vanilla. And I honestly didn't think that there was any way that they were going to pull off the upset. And they just came into town and just, from one end, I mean, all across the board, just laid a spanking on Ohio State.
I mean, our defense is our calling card, and it's been the calling card for the Hokies for several years. I'm sure you all have heard of Lunch Pail D, and this is actually the 20th anniversary of the Lunch Pail. I don't know if you guys had noticed that where Frank Beamer was on ESPN, but it is a very blue collar mentality on the defensive side of the ball. They come to go to work, and we take a lot of pride in our defense, and our front 7 is last year. Our front 4 was probably it was a great front 4, but it's not as good as it is this year. Like our front 4 this year is probably the best front 4 I've ever seen at Virginia Tech. I mean, our linebackers, we lost Chase Williams, who was Greg Williams' son, and he was a phenomenal linebacker. But the silver lining is Chase Williams missed 4 games in the middle of the season, in the bulk of our ACC schedule, and his backup, Andrew Matua-Pawaka, had to step in and start. And he got, great experience, and he's going to be the starter this year. So, I mean, I feel like our front 7 is still a great front 7. And, our back end, we have Brandon Faison back this year. Last year, Faison was still, he was playing hurt the whole year, and he never told any of the coaches. He still had a stress fracture in his leg. Along with Kendall Fuller, can essentially shut down both sides of the field. I mean, we lost Kashawn Jarrett, but he was a big run stopper for us against Ohio State, against y'all. He was that rover position that Cam Chancellor made famous for us. But he comes up and he's the run stopper, and he actually acts as another linebacker that plays coverage. But that if I had to guess, that would probably be our weakest point in our defense this year. But I think our defense this year is a lot better than it was last year. And I mean, Bud Foster is a great defensive mind, and he's had all summer to dissect Urban Meyer's offense. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the challenge. I'm excited to see what he's come up with against your high-powered offense.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to ask you. You guys essentially, I mean, not essentially, you did. Virginia Tech shut down the Ohio State running game. I mean, we can sit here and say Ezekiel Elliott had a broken hand, only got 8 carries, whatnot. But you shut it down. I mean, we had a, rookie offensive line. But how did you guys go ahead and, give up 364 yards rushing to Miami 249 of them to Duke Johnson.
Well, you got to look at this. Luther Maddie was injured after the third game of the year. Luther Maddie is an unreal defensive tackle. Okay. He's an All-American. He'll probably, Joey Bosa for y'all is projected to go top 5 in the draft. I'd put Luther Maddie up there just along with Joey Bosa as probably one of the top defensive linemen in the country. He wasn't there. Nigel Williams was also the starter. He was injured that game. We had a lot of injuries toward the end of the year. And like you said, we usually hang our hat on stopping the run. And in that game, I was at that game too. It was Duke Johnson ran all over us, and I had no idea how. It was embarrassing. You lose 30-6 to a team that you shouldn't lose on Thursday night to. It's embarrassing.
It wasn't, I wouldn't say embarrassing, but it was just so much that kind of shocking. Do you think, I know I asked you this and we'll put it up in the blog post, but do you think that if you were to face Ohio State towards the end of the season, we'd have had the same results?
The fanboy answer would be like, yeah, we could have beat you because we always come to play in big games. But the actuality answer is probably not. Y'all got better all through the season, and we seem to regress a lot. A lot of that was injuries, and a lot of that was Ohio State seemed to gel as a team a lot better than we did. Not having Ezekiel Elliott hurt y'all a lot. Not being able to run the ball sets up a lot for your offense because it opens up all those little short hitch passes and all those little across the middle passes for it would open up the offense for JT Barrett. They say that running the ball is dead in college football and in the NFL, but I believe if you can't run the ball, you're not going to be able to move the ball against a great defense. So,
no, if running the ball is dead, then the funnier things have happened as far as you look at the Sugar Bowl and the national championship and even the Big Ten championship and what Ezekiel Elliott did.
Exactly.
There's a lot of different factors that played into that, but
Exactly. Ezekiel Elliott is essentially going to be the wild card for this game. I believe if we can keep him in check, we have an opportunity to keep this game close. It's going to come down to your offense versus our defense, and if we can hold on to the ball. Michael Brewer. Everybody said how great he played in the game last year, but everybody forgets he threw 3 interceptions, and probably one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen that literally set y'all up on the doorstep for a score that could have broken our backs. But, he put the defense in horrible positions twice, and our defense just somehow rose up and held you to a field goal once and got a turnover the second time. It's all, I think, honestly, if we have to play from behind against you guys this year, I don't believe we can come back and win.
You are listening to Men in Scarlet and Gray on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V Sporto channel. Yeah, the biggest thing was seeing Virginia Tech come out to that, lead and just Ohio State not being able to do anything. I know on their last possession they were moving down the field, but JT threw the interception and everything. It's going to be really interesting as far as this game, and I think one of the biggest keys are, I think last year Virginia Tech was 9 for 17 on third down, and Ohio State was only 4 for 16, and time of possession was big, huge factor, in Virginia Tech's favor. What do you have, Chip?
Well, I want to thank Dwight for the pronunciation. I'm gonna butcher this. Matua Puaka for the middle line.
Puaka.
Okay, all right. Besides Motua Puaka, obviously the seemingly the individual who could not miss when I was in attendance, Michael Brewer. Besides, we already talked about the idea of Kendall Fuller, and I'm familiar with J.C. Coleman. Are there other players that Ohio State fans should be aware of or familiar with? Just because, I almost forgot. I cannot believe I almost forgot Bucky Hodges at tight end. Because I look at Bucky Hodges as being a matchup issue for Ohio State with either their linebackers or their secondary. He's that athletic of a tight end. So
he was actually a 5-star quarterback recruit for us and redshirted a year And then we had all these quarterbacks come in, and he moved to tight end.
So, I mean, who are some of the other players that we should be aware of as Ohio State fans? I mean, I just rattled off a few.
On the defensive side of the ball, definitely on our defensive line, both ends, defensive ends, you have Ken Canham and Daddy Nicholas. Both of them are all ACC selections this year. Daddy Nicholas is actually on the All-American, is an All-American, honorable mention. Also in the middle, Luther Matty. He's a huge run stopper. He will be the defensive front four will be probably the linchpin of. They will affect exactly how well their offense will be able to move. Our front four it's unreal how Bud and Frank can recruit guys that just can run. I mean, they're a little bit undersized, and that hurts us a lot of times, like against teams that, the power running games of, like, say, Georgia Tech, or it actually hurt us a lot against Miami too, because Miami had a lot of bigger offensive linemen too. But in a team that's a more finesse team that tries to run like a 4-wide run and shoot, those defensive linemen, they're so quick off the ball. I mean, they can get to the quarterback just in a couple seconds. Brandon Faison coming back off an injury. It'll be interesting to see if he is 100%, because as I mentioned before, last year he wasn't. On the offensive side of the ball, you mentioned J.C. Coleman. J.C. Coleman at the beginning of last year was 4th on the depth chart at running back, but because of injuries, he was called into duty, and when he became the starter, our rushing production went from 3.6 yards per carry to 6.4 yards per carry. He's a senior leader. He is probably one of the smallest people on the team, but he is an ox. He is a beast in the weight room. Great kid. We have a lot of good receivers. You mentioned Bucky Hodges. Bucky Hodges is but the other tight end as well, Ryan Malik. Ryan Malik has probably some of the best hands on the team. He's really Michael Brewer's security blanket across the middle. If we need like 5 yards and a first down, you better believe he's going to be looking for Malik across the middle. On the outside, Isaiah Ford and Cam Phillips, both are speedsters, both have great hands. They matured a lot last year. They're both rising sophomores. That's just to mention a few.
Yeah, I was going to say with Bucky Hodges, it's going off of the listing that Virginia Tech has for him, he's at 6'7", 242 pounds. So think of it this way from an Ohio State perspective, is that Garyon Conley, he's listed at 6 foot. Eli Apple's at 6'1". There's nobody. I mean, they're automatically giving up 6-7 inches of height, let alone, he outweighs them by nearly 50 pounds.
Oh, he's a nightmare. He's a nightmare.
So realistic.
He can line up inside, but he can also he's so quick that he can line up in a slot, or in some sets he even lines up on the outside on the boundary side, and lines up like a wide receiver and runs like a fade to the end zone. When we get in the red zone, they love to run that little fade pass, and he uses his height and his build. And, if the ball's there, he's catching it. He's coming down with it. I mean,
I've got to ask, I mean, you mentioned Bud Foster, and I have tremendous respect for Bud Foster as a defensive coordinator. I have the utmost respect for Frank Beamer just because he runs a clean program. Everything that, at Virginia Tech, is above the board in terms of, quality education, quality football. Is Bud Foster I don't want to say that the head coach in waiting, because I know that that's a very derisive term after, everything that happened at other schools, but is Bud Foster, or is it going to be Shane Beamer, or how do you see it when, I'm not trying to push Coach Beamer out the door per se, but when Frank Beamer eventually decides that, I've had enough. Is Bud Foster? Is that basically what is keeping him in Blacksburg?
That is the prevailing theory, that Bud has been told that he will be the next head coach. None of this has been, confirmed or anything like that. But Auburn threw a ton of money at him, you have to think, because there was a phone call that was made to Bud Foster to become the defensive coordinator for Auburn this year before Muschamp was hired. he has turned down, he has been called. I mean, you don't have top-rated defenses year in and year out and not get calls for head coaching jobs. Part of me thinks Bud is, content being one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the country and, not having the responsibility of a head coach. Part of me thinks that's part of the reason too. As far as Shane eventually will probably be a head coach at Virginia Tech just because of the pedigree, for what Frank has done for the program. I mean, Shane played his college ball at Virginia Tech. Of course, he went away, and Shane is a phenomenal recruiter. When he was at South Carolina, he is responsible for Jadeveon Clowney and Marcus Lattimore at South Carolina. So, I mean, it would be a shame to not keep Shane in the fold. He's done wonders with the running backs. He's very well spoken. When Frank had his surgery before the bowl game, Shane was running the team. And a lot of people in Blacksburg and a lot of people in Hokie Nation thought that was very telling that, Shane, instead of Bud, Shane was running the team. And Shane handled all the head coaches' press conferences, all the media, head coaching media, because let's be honest, Frank's not in the best health. There's a lot of questions about his health. If I had to guess, I'd say this year and next year after the Battle of Bristol year will probably be his last. And, he still loves what he does. And if his health holds out, he can, and we continue to make bowl games and, have better seasons than we have had the last couple of years, he could coach for another 5 or 6 years. I mean, he has kind of enough credibility like Joe Pa did at Penn State, and at Bobby Bowden did at Florida State. They're not going to try to push him out, but, there's people there that if he does decide to leave, that the program will be in great hands.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. I know that, 22 bowl games in a row that Virginia Tech's gone to?
Yes, sir. And last year, trust me, I was on pins and needles at the UVA game because I was afraid that was going to end.
I mean, that is pretty remarkable in itself. And I believe there was 7 of those were BCS games.
Which we are 2 and 5 1 and 6 if my math is right, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. The only question I don't want this to sound, derogatory or mean or anything, but when coaches come to, Columbus, the biggest things are, beating that team up north and winning bowl games and getting to the big bowl games. And that's one of the reasons Cooper was let go. So my question is, I mean, I know that 22 bowl games, is a remarkable feat, but not really winning the big games. I mean, does that leave a black mark on somebody's, legacy?
Frank is always he's going to be remembered. I mean, before that, we had a streak of 10-win seasons that was pretty remarkable as well. He was only we had as many 10. The only team I believe had more 10-win seasons in a row than us was Texas there for a while. I mean, we've lost out on some recruits here recently because, we don't seem to be able to win the big BCS games. I mean, we lost to that team up north, as you call it, in a BCS game that I honestly didn't think we should even have been in. And somehow Denard Robinson threw 2 passes from his backside that got caught. And I'll never know how either one of them got caught. But it hampers recruiting in a sense, but what helps us is the fact that our recruiting base, we recruit Tidewater extremely well. We recruit Richmond extremely well. And Tidewater is, almost as rich as Florida is. You've had some phenomenal football players come out of the Tidewater region. Tyrod Taylor and Percy Harvin, just to be named 2 off the top of my head right there. Michael Vick out of the Tidewater region. You've had, Allen Iverson in basketball out of that region. We recruit that region so well because, we dominate UVA. When we played Maryland, we dominated Maryland. Usually, we beat Duke. Up until this year, last couple years, Duke hasn't been really relevant in football. UNC, we usually beat UNC, and the Hokies are good enough, and the coaching staff does a great job with turning 3-star talent into better talent than 5-star recruits. We don't on draft day, you don't see our names at the top of top 5 draft classes, but in 4 years, those players that were 3 stars that we got would be almost better, sometimes better than the 5 stars that other programs got. To answer your question, yes, it does hurt us, and yes, we have a place in Merriman, which is the athletic facility reserved for a national championship trophy, and whether that'll ever get filled or not in my lifetime, I don't know. But not winning the BCS game, but just getting to them is nice and all to get to the BCS game, but we need to start winning them to become more nationally relevant and to get back to where people feared playing us.
Right, and that's I was trying to basically get to is like the mid 90s, early 2000 really, that Virginia Tech was always in the conversation for national championships. Is Virginia Tech going to be able to make that leap and, that step forward? Do you think that we'll get to the predictions later, but if Virginia Tech does another domination today, or not today, but Monday night, do you think that it'll light a fire underneath them and maybe get the team, pulled together and make a run at the ACC and get put in the national picture?
I can honestly say if we beat Ohio State on Monday, if we lost to Furman the next week, I would not be surprised one bit. But to answer your question, yes, I believe it would give them a lot of confidence. A young team like we are, it would give them a lot of confidence to show that, we can play with the big boys and, we should win these games and we should be in the national conversation. With this year's, with the way the playoff system is now, you have to, if you're a one-loss team, your one loss needs to be against somebody that was, finished the year with either just 2 losses or 1 loss as well.
That's not necessarily true. Look what happened last year.
Yeah.
The first year and, we lose to Virginia Tech and they go in, I forget what their final record was, but
we finished the year 8-6.
Yes. It just, it was one of those things where, if it's early in the season, I think it's easy to recover from, as, Ohio State proved last year.
Also, though, but you got to think the Big 12 not having a real champion, not having a championship game also hurt them a lot in the committee's eyes, I believe, because they had 3 teams that were clamoring saying, we're the best team in the Big 12, and I think that allowed Ohio State to slip in a little. Don't get me wrong, y'all's resume was fantastic. I mean, you lose your starting quarterback before the season starts. You bring in an unproven quarterback. He runs through the season, has 1 blemish. He gets hurt, and then you bring in your 3rd quarterback, and he wins 3 of the biggest games of his career in a row, and in convincing fashion. I mean, your Ohio State was the best team in college football last year. I have no qualms with that at all. The best team won the playoff, so.
Yeah, I definitely think for the first year it worked itself out. I know fans of the Big 12 would sit there and say no, like you were saying. They felt that they should have gotten in and everything. But hey, it is what it is. And when you go and beat, in the Big Ten championship, like you said, with the 3rd quarterback,
you beat a Wisconsin
and dominate a team. Yeah, Wisconsin team, 59-0. It was pretty convincing. Chip, do you have anything else?
No, not before we get into predictions. I think.
You are listening to Men in Scarlet and Gray on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V Sporto channel. Last football season, DraftKings.com crowned more millionaires than any other one-week fantasy sports site anywhere. And this season, the prizes are even bigger. You can start the season by winning $2 million in Week 1. What? Why am I explaining this to you when I could be winning this money? It's the biggest fantasy football contest ever. $10 million in prizes are up for grabs, including $2 million for first place and $1 million for second. 1 week fantasy means no season-long commitments. It's fantasy football on demand. Play where you want, when you want, with the players you want. You've never experienced football like this. Just pick your players, pile up the points, and pick up your cash. That's it. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. There's only a few preseason games left to go before the regular season kicks off, so hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code Buckeye to play free for a shot at the $2 million top prize in the Week 1 Millionaire Maker. Enter Buckeye for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
I got a couple questions for you guys.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Now, Ezekiel Elliott. Now, everybody is already putting him on a pedestal for possibly being the Heisman. You know, like you said last year, we didn't get to see him a whole lot in the game because of the broke wrist. Is he somebody that, you know, Hokie fans we should be extremely paying attention to? Is he as good as the hype? Is what I'm asking.
Answer this first part, and I can let Chip answer some more. You can ask Alabama. You know, Alabama was one of the top teams as far as stopping a run, and Ezekiel had 236 or 240 some yards against them. Oregon, you know, he ran all crazy over them. I think it's definitely one, but like he's always said, he wouldn't be where he's at if it wasn't for, you know, the slobs on the front line.
Just to kind of, you know, piggyback off that, I think, you know, Dwight, you kind of already referred to, you know, J.T. Barrett being inexperienced and last year in the second game of the season when Ohio State played Virginia Tech. Keep in mind, last year at that same time, that was only the second game for 4 of the 5 offensive linemen. So the development of Ezekiel Elliott coincided with the maturation and development of the offensive line. So not to take anything away from Ezekiel Elliott, you know, but to Shannon's point, I think pointing to, you know, they refer to them affectionately amongst themselves as the slobs, but the offensive line of Ohio State, you know, that paved the way for Ezekiel Elliott's dominance against Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship, the performance against Alabama, and the performance against Oregon. Now, I will say one of the most, I think, underrated aspects of Ezekiel Elliott's game, he has power. He's about 220, 230. I think one of the most underrated aspects of Ezekiel Elliott's game is his speed. The point in reference that I would make is that 85-yard touchdown run against Alabama. Keep in mind, you know, Nick Saban doesn't necessarily recruit slowpokes to play in the secondary. You know,
he does not.
So he outran that. You know, he outran that secondary. You know, now granted he had the blocks up front, but if I had to give a scouting report for Ezekiel Elliott, I would compare him to a bigger Emmitt Smith in terms of his running style. You know, that low to the ground. He's not going to necessarily make tremendous cuts, but you know, he's elusive enough, he's physical enough, and he's certainly faster than I think a lot of people give him credit for.
That's really high praise. You know, Emmitt Smith, that's extremely high praise.
Well, I just look at the running style, just to kind of that's basically where my, you know, if you had to, you know, when I watch him run, you know, he keeps his pads low to the ground. He's not gonna. I mean, he can, you know, take a shot. He can run you over, but it's not going to be. It's not like, you know, since we're talking about, you know, the Sugar Bowl game against Alabama, there's a difference between Derrick Henry and Ezekiel Elliott. You know what I'm saying? Like in terms of the running style, like Derrick Henry is looking to run you over, and I think Ezekiel Elliott he can run you over, but it's a little bit more of a running style that is physical, but it's not necessarily the bulldozer physical style, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Plus, you're going to see the new caveat this year that he has, because he didn't have last year with the broken wrist, his favorite go-to move of the stiff arm.
Well, yeah, it seems like my next one is we were talking about running over people. So Urban is keeping this extremely close to the vest about who is going to start. Now, I don't know if this is just gamesmanship by Coach Meyer or if he honestly doesn't know. But if Cardale Jones is to start, he's more the pocket passer, pick you apart. But he has shown, you know, flashes that he can run somebody over in the hole if he wants to. In your opinion, do you think he will be able to run over, the big boys up front for us? Because Luther Matty and Nigel Williams, they aren't small individuals. They were a little bigger. They're a little bigger than Alabama's front defensive tackles.
I'll let Chip go ahead and start with this one.
I think, for what it's worth, I think JT Barrett is going to start. But to answer your question, yeah, Cardale Jones, it was very much a hold your breath, at least from my experience last year when there were times when Cardale Jones, he not only ran over Alabama defenders, but it was kind of, as you mentioned earlier, Dwight, we're talking, he was our third string quarterback. Okay, please don't get hurt, because guess what? Then we're going to have to go to the Wildcat with Jalen Marshall if you get hurt. But Cardale Jones, yeah, he has more of a reckless abandon approach to running when needs call for them. He did run over, Alabama defenders. He ran over in the national championship game. He ran over a nose tackle that weighed 300 pounds plus on different occasions to get a necessary first down. I just think JT Barrett runs the zone read option better than Cardale Jones, which leads me to believe that he will start. But earlier today on the Big Ten coaches press conference, teleconference, I should say, Coach Meyer hinted that both players will see action against Virginia Tech.
Chip, getting to what you said about JT starting, do you think if he does start that it'll be, last year's, the fact that he was sacked 7 times and he was under pressure a lot, do you think that'll make him have, happy feet or, flashbacks of what happened last year at all? Or do you think that he's put that behind him?
I think he's put it behind him because, we didn't – now I want to give credit where credit is due, with Coach Foster and Virginia Tech with that bear front cover 0 scheme, that whole idea of like the 3 interior linemen covering the center and the guards and making it almost impossible for Ohio State to run through the interior, and the outside linebackers playing wide to take away that, the edge run game. And the very next week, keep in mind now there's a huge drop off in terms of talent and coaching from Virginia Tech to Kent State. But believe it or not, Kent State, literally the very first play defensively against Ohio State, they tried to do it, and Ohio State had an effective counter to it. And other opponents throughout the year tried to do something similar to what Virginia Tech did, and they weren't able to do it. Supposedly, Coach Meyer has been stewing, and they practice against a bear front every 3 days in preparation for this game. But to your question, I don't necessarily look at it as much as happy feet as much as knowing, all right, I need to find my outlet quick. And I just think that JT Barrett, he's a better runner. It's going to sound kind of strange. I just was praising and lauding Cardale Jones' ability to run over Alabama and Oregon defenders. But I think JT Barrett is actually a better open field runner. Because he's not as big. I think he's a more elusive runner in the open field than Cardale Jones. So in the event that my primary receiver is covered, my secondary receiver is covered, I need to take off. I think I don't necessarily look at it as much as happy feet as much as knowing what to do with the ball quickly and efficiently if he needs to do so. I'm going to let Shannon give his praise of Cardale and JT.
Definitely praise for Cardale because I am definitely in the Jones corner and him starting. And the reason I say that is Urban Meyer left his press conference Monday, and the last thing that he said that is mistakes are fixed by great effort. And if you notice during the 3 games that Cardale was playing, any type of mistakes he made, before he even got to the sideline, he already shook him off and forgot about him and moved forward. I mean, I think I want to say the Alabama game, or it was either Alabama or the Oregon game, and he, had back-to-back turnovers, I believe. And he came to the sideline, and Urban was like, what's going on? And don't worry, coach, I got this. I just think that the way that Jones plays, and don't get me wrong, I think JT, like Chip said, he's got more of a skill set, but there's just something about Jones when it's just that reckless abandonment sometimes, and he's going to do what he has to do. I mean, I think there was one time it was like 4th and 1 or 2, and everything was clogged up in the middle, and he went 5 yards behind and out to the outside and still got the first down. It's just the little intangibles that I think he has.
It's going to be interesting to see which quarterback starts. Like you said, Urban said that both could play. I know that the word from Blacksburg is that they are preparing for both. They're preparing like that they will see both. Not so much that they don't know if it's going to be an equal amount, but they are preparing that they will for both quarterbacks to play. I'm actually really interested to see how Braxton Miller is going to fit into this game, because he is the biggest X factor, I believe, for this game. I mean, I could honestly see them going with throw a little screen pass to him and him hitting, Cardell or JT, whichever one's in at quarterback, with a pass down the sideline. I could see some trickeration being played by Ohio State. He's going to have to be accounted for by our defense, and I'm sure Bud has preached that every day in practice. But it's preaching is one thing; actually having him on the field and knowing where he is another thing. And I'm just interested to see what you guys think Braxton will be able to do.
My opinion, he's the biggest wild card for the whole Buckeye season. There's just so many things that Braxton can do after watching him for years as a quarterback, and it's literally like watching a video game sometimes. Some of the moves that he makes, and you're sitting there, you're like, he's about to get killed here, and all of a sudden he just does some, stops on the dime, defensive back goes running past him, and he just goes, running right past and in for a touchdown or something. It's just some of the things he does. I know that going from quarterback to wide receiver, it's not an overnight thing, but he is a pure athlete, and we've said that I don't know how many times. I think that, in all honesty, by the end of the season, that he's going to be, it's not going to be the H-back is the Percy Harvin role. I think it's going to be the H-back is, this H-back that you just recruited. Is he going to be like Braxton Miller? Is he going to be that type of, person? I think he's going to make a lot of people forget about Percy Harvin. But at the same time, it's going to be interesting against Virginia Tech because it's his first game, learning a lot of different stuff. But I do see a little, like you said, the trickery with the double pass. I mean, it's been stated since all throughout training camp and everything. It's something that they've been working on. And I know Jeremiah, when he said before, even if they don't use it, always keep saying it so that way it keeps them in, in the back of the opponent's mind.
See, I think that Braxton will expose our only weakness on defense, because the rover will have to be the one coming up and, covering Braxton Miller. And that's a huge question mark for us, because I don't know if any of you guys are aware, like our starting rover that was coming out of spring practice, CJ Rivas, was dismissed from the university for like unknown reasons. I mean, he went before the student conduct committee and was dismissed, and they haven't released. His lawyer said it wasn't legal, it wasn't academic, it wasn't anything like that, and they haven't released why he was released from the school. So we are, Desmond Fry is going to be the starting rover, and he's a capable player, but Rivas was so much better and had, the reps in there in the games when Kashawn had been banged up last year, or when, we had been in a game that was out of reach, he had come in and gotten the reps, and he had been getting all the reps with the first team in spring practice. So I really think that that's going to be a huge, huge area to watch in this game.
I'll let you go ahead and answer what he was asking earlier, Chip.
Well, I mean, it's not just Braxton Miller at the H-back position, but Curtis Samuel is another player that recall Curtis Samuel necessarily getting on the field much at all last year against Virginia Tech, but he should be involved almost in the same kind of manner that Braxton Miller is at that H-back position. I look for the idea of trying to counteract if Bud Foster comes out with that bare front cover zero scheme again, some speed option plays to try to, like you said, to kind of hopefully adjust, the scheme, to kind of get them to back off the line of scrimmage, as well as getting to kind of take it in a different angle. Nick Vanette, who's at tight end, to try and get him isolated on a linebacker or a safety, on maybe some kind of a slant, anything that will kind of accentuate the fact that, all right, Virginia Tech is playing so close to the line of scrimmage with no safety help that missed tackle and somebody can be gone. Vanette is arguably the top senior tight end for the 2016 NFL draft. So I look at him as being a legitimate option within this game, as well as getting Braxton Miller and Curtis Samuel on. You mentioned the idea of screen plays, the idea of a big play within the Ohio State arsenal is the idea of screens, jet option plays where just a little quick pitch on screens, or on option plays to the perimeter. I look at those as trying to negate and unclog the middle. It's going to be an interesting chess match, to say the least.
Yeah, you're definitely right on that. I think Samuels was 5 for 26 rushing last year. One of the other key points that before we start getting into predictions, I wanted to make is Michael Thomas. He was 6 catches for 98 yards. He led the team last year, and he's definitely going to be there this year. So
that's going to be the matchup for in terms of, all right, your best versus our best. And what I mean by that, Dwight, is, all right, so Kendall Fuller is a future first round draft choice at corner, just like his brother. A tremendous defensive back. Well, Michael Thomas is arguably Ohio State's best wide receiver. He's very, very big, very physical. So that's where I to see how that matchup will take place. The best defensive back for Virginia Tech against Ohio State's best wide receiver. That's something to keep an eye on.
But it's funny though, Bud doesn't usually like to put them on an island like that. He puts them on an island, but he doesn't have one defensive back just shadow the best receiver the whole game. He runs similar to a boundary and a field corner. So Fuller will be the boundary corner and Faison will be the field corner. So it all depend on the matchup depending on where the wide receiver lines up.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead and give our predictions for the game. We'll go ahead and start with our guest, Dwight.
Do you want the fanboy prediction or the actual prediction?
Either one you want to give.
Aren't they one and the same?
Well, me. The actual prediction is you are the number one team in the nation for a reason. I said this last year that if we kept it within 28 points, I would be happy. This year I'm going to lower my expectations a little if we keep it within 20 because of your suspensions and people being hurt. I actually think this game is going to be a lot lower scoring than a lot of people think it's going to be. I think it's probably going to go about 28-17 your way.
Okay. How about you, Chip?
I want to, since we're on the record here, and I want to thank Dwight for all of his insight on Virginia Tech. I want to make it abundantly clear to all of our listeners that the scoring prediction that Dwight just gave, he and I have not corresponded during the course of the day, because that is actually the prediction that I'm going with as well. 28-17 Ohio State to Virginia Tech 17. I really think that it's going to be a defensive struggle on both sides, because I think Ohio State's going to be, I keep talking about this bare front cover zero scheme. I think Bud Foster would be foolish not to try to unleash that. But I also believe that Bud Foster is too good of a defensive coach not to have plan B, plan C, plan D, et cetera, kind of that chess match, so to speak, with Urban Meyer and Ed Warner trying to figure out and counter which each other is doing. I already mentioned the idea of getting Braxton Miller and Curtis Samuel involved in speed option plays, and Nick Vanette hopefully isolated on a linebacker to try and force an adjustment in the scheme. But one of the people I respect immensely within the college football world as an analyst is Chris Spielman, not just because he played for Ohio State, because I think he has tremendous insight. And I agree with him when he says, going against Virginia Tech in a very loud, boisterous environment, Virginia Tech is always extremely difficult defensively. The stunts, the blitzes that they will throw. I think Ohio State is, with all of the suspensions along the wide receivers, but also losing Joey Bosa on the defensive end, that's going to hurt. So the true key for Ohio State defensively is shutting down Virginia Tech's run game. We already mentioned, J.C. Coleman. So I'm going to go with Ohio State 28, Virginia Tech 17. But I look for it to be Ohio State scoring a touchdown late in the fourth quarter to put the game away. I think this is going to be a more difficult game than Ohio State fans have certainly given credit to Virginia Tech for. And I certainly would not feel comfortable with the betting line as it stands today. I think giving 11 points is extremely generous and quite foolish in my estimation.
Or you could be lucky like me and bet it before your suspensions.
There you go. Well, it's funny. I mean, you guys are both picking 11. So what's funny is I learned my lesson from last year. I'm not taking this game for granted. I don't think anybody from, the Buckeyes are taking it for granted. There's no doubt that revenge is on the mind of the players. I mean, this is the team that, took away their undefeated season on the way to a national championship. I see with the boisterous crowd and the, both defenses going back and forth, I see it's going to be a low-scoring affair also. Unless Ohio State can rip off some points and quiet down the crowd, then it can get really out of hand really quickly. But I'm going to go with Ohio State 24, Virginia Tech 17. You are listening to Men in Scarlet and Gray on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V Sporto channel. All right, moving on. Let's go ahead and do some predictions for some the other big games that are coming up this weekend. Let's look at that team up north versus Utah. We'll go ahead and start with Chip.
I like Utah in a close one here. I think that they are handling this perfectly because all of the attention is on Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines. And I think they are just literally simmering and stewing for the opportunity on national television to show that their program is more than capable of playing against Jim Harbaugh. And so I like Utah in a low-scoring defensive slog.
What are your thoughts, Dwight?
Well, I know better than to pick that team up north talking to two Ohio State fans.
There you go.
But I agree with Chip. Utah is playing this perfectly. I mean, everybody is talking about, Jim Harbaugh, his return to Michigan. There's even a khaki cam that is going to be for this game. I mean,
that's ridiculous.
Just focusing on his pants. Who cares what pants the man is wearing? I mean, Utah is part of that Pac-12, and boys, I hate to say it, that Pac-12 might be the best conference in college football. They are unreal, and Utah is very, very underrated. I look for them to, get this one done too. Probably a couple touchdowns, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. My biggest thing, like you said, with the whole khaki cam and, Fox having the khaki bus and all that, I think that Utah is going to come in this with a chip on their shoulder, especially with the fact that they walked into the big house last year and put a spanking on them. I mean, granted, it was, Brady Choke as their coach, but I don't think that there's been enough added for the offense in order to counteract anything against Utah. Their defense might be able to prevent a lot of stuff, but I still see Utah, pulling this one out at home. TCU versus Minnesota. We'll go ahead and start with Dwight.
TCU's got to be they probably still have a huge chip on their shoulder for not being included in the first playoff, but I mean, this is a huge test. I mean, Minnesota last year was a very underrated team. I feel out of the Big Ten. I mean, if I remember correctly, they took you guys, pretty much, they gave you a good game.
Mm-hmm.
But
in the snow.
Yeah, in the snow. But TCU, it's going to be interesting, to see if they want to come out and make a statement, that we are the best team in the Big 12. I honestly think, though, Minnesota is probably a little bit improved, but I don't think that they can hang with TCU. Look for TCU to – it's going to be a lot closer than most people think. Touchdown, 10 points, but TCU pulls this away.
I agree with what you're saying as far as, TCU coming in with the chip on their shoulder, proving that they should have been in the national championship picture as far as, the Final Four. I mean, they proved that in their bowl game by just putting a shellacking. But I think, in all honesty, Minnesota, it's been a wild card of ours as far as our Big Ten predictions, and they have a chance to maybe, sneak up and take that, West Division. But I think early in the season, learning who you have and everything, and I see TCU going into Minnesota and walking out with a big win. Go ahead, Chip.
I'm actually going to lean more with Dwight here, in the sense that I think TCU is going to win. I think it's going to be a tougher slog just because a lot of people are forgetting that TCU, they have a tremendous offense, but they are replacing a substantial amount on their defense. Now granted, the problem for Minnesota is they've lost Max Williams, they lost David Cobb to the NFL. So they're kind of rebuilding offensively, and they were never really the most dynamic offense to begin with. But I just think that Minnesota, they're taking a lot of pride, especially in their secondary. I think Minnesota is going to make it a more difficult game than I think the national media is giving them credit for. I have tremendous respect for Jerry Kill and his coaching staff. So I think TCU wins, but I think this is going to be closer, and I'm more with Dwight's line of thinking.
Okay. Moving on, let's talk about the Auburn-Louisville. Go ahead, Chip.
Well, Louisville should make it interesting because Bobby Petrino is a terrific coach. I mean, he's a sleazeball morally, but we're not going to talk about that. So I think Auburn, with new defensive coordinator Will Muschamp, that's going to be something to keep an eye on, not just for this game, but all going forward this season. Dwight, just to let you know, I have Auburn as one of my Final Four playoff teams. So I think Auburn will do just enough to win this one, but it's going to be closer than I think Auburn fans would like to admit.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Dwight?
I agree with Auburn being, one of the better teams in the SEC this year. Muschamp's he wasn't a very good head coach, but he is a phenomenal coordinator. I think that, Louisville under Petrino's, he's a great coach and all, but he needs a little bit of time to clean that mess up. I don't think that they have the firepower to deal with an SEC West team right now. Auburn should be, Auburn's defense will clamp down, and Auburn should win this easily.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Louisville has, I don't think they have enough firepower, to combat and knock down Auburn's defense. And I don't think their defense, even though they've got, a good core of linebackers, I don't think it's going to be enough to slow down the War Eagles offense. So I'm going to go with Auburn myself. Let's Notre Dame and Texas. We'll go ahead and start off with Chip.
Well, Texas is still in transition under Charlie Strong. That there's a tremendous rebuilding job going on there. I think there's quarterback issues. True freshmen are filling up within the starting lineup. So I think Notre Dame wins this one under the eyes of Touchdown Jesus, which is on the Hesburgh Library that you always see. I see Notre Dame winning this one easily on NBC on Saturday night.
Okay. Dwight.
Chip, I hate to disagree, but I think Notre Dame might actually be one of the most overrated teams in the country. Charlie Strong does have a huge rebuilding job to do in Texas, but he is a phenomenal coach. Texas is going to be a lot better this year than most people think. And, I think this is going to be a game that Notre Dame is kind of overlooked because I think they're drinking a little bit of their own Kool-Aid. They're reading the national media, and people are saying, they're going to be the national darlings. And, I think they might overlook Texas a little bit, and I think Texas might steal this one. Because Charlie Strong is a great motivator, and he wants to create a winning mentality back in Texas, and he wants to create a clean program. And he, if you listen to any of his interviews, if you listen to any of his bites on television about the program, he genuinely cares about these kids, and he genuinely cares about Texas football. So, I think Texas might get them. It's going to be an extremely close game, but I think there at the end, Texas will get them, even though they are starting a ton of freshmen, like you said, Chip.
I love the no Irish love.
Oh, they need to join a conference. They need to play football in the ACC. They are in the ACC in every other sport. I'm tired of them getting special treatment.
I will say that this is, and I don't necessarily, I don't take offense to the fact that you picked Texas. I really don't. I will say that I work with a close friend of mine is all I have to do is mention the fact that Notre Dame gets a guaranteed ACC bowl slot, and I could basically fry an egg on the back of his neck by, like 30 seconds after I remind him of that one, because just the frustration and irritation, you can just hear it in your voice about, the fact that Notre Dame gets all these ACC conference benefits by not being in the ACC. It's palpable.
They play sport. They're in the ACC conference in every other sport. I just don't understand. But yet they're required to play 6 ACC teams a year, but they get to pick and choose. Although next year we actually are going to South Bend to play them. So I'm going to make that trip. So hopefully that'll be nice.
Highly recommend it. Seriously. Even, I'm just saying that as a college football fan, the opportunity to go to a game in South Bend, it's completely, it's one of the things years ago when Ohio State played at Notre Dame. It's weird to think about that. It was actually back in 1996, so almost 20 years ago. I remember Kirk Herbstreit apologizing on behalf of Ohio State fans to Notre Dame fans, because a lot of Ohio State fans went in there, really raucous and overly rambunctious, and they forgot the fact that, Notre Dame, say what you will about not joining the conference and maybe, drinking too much of their Kool-Aid, as you said, Dwight. There is kind of, you can tell it's a very special and spiritual place. So highly recommend it to go not only next year, but to any college football fan. If you've never had an opportunity to go to a game up in South Bend, it's worth the trip.
All right, I agree with the fact that maybe they should join the conference and everything. But if you look at their schedule, they do have one of the toughest schedules that they, put together out of anybody in the country. So if you make them join the ACC, you're basically letting them, and it's no disrespect to the ACC or anything. It just is what it is. Even if they were to join the Big Ten, they would have an easier schedule. So I kind of, see where people are talking about, let them schedule who they're scheduling or whatever. And if they went out with the tough schedule, hey, they deserve to be in. I think that, in all honesty, that they are going to beat Texas at home, because of Texas's youth. And Charlie Strong is building something, and very soon he is going to be on the national stage and talking about getting into the playoffs and stuff. All right, moving on. The last one here, Wisconsin versus Alabama. We'll go ahead and let our guest finish this one off.
Well, I have no love for SEC teams because I live in, Big Orange, where everybody's huge Tennessee fans. But this Alabama front seven they are impressive. Wisconsin has the big uglies up front too, and they like to pound the ball. It's gonna be slugged out in the trenches, and it's gonna be fun to watch. It's gonna be fun to see which trenches, which side of the ball breaks first. I actually believe though that Alabama's front seven is going to be a little overwhelming for Wisconsin. Nick Saban, I think the last couple of years, actually hurt his feelings a little. The fact that he's he didn't have as good of a team as he normally does. So I believe that, Alabama will get this, but it's gonna be close. I look for it to be like a touchdown game. Alabama scoring late to win it. But it's gonna be low scoring, probably 17-10.
Okay, Chip, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree. I think it's going to be low scoring. I mean, this is basically Wisconsin's strength, which is their traditional power running game, going directly against Alabama's strength, which is the defensive front seven. I like Alabama, but to Dwight's point, I think it's going to be low scoring because Alabama, for all of their talent, not knowing who their starting quarterback is or being able to identify who that starting quarterback is, I think that it just shows there's some major offensive issues that need to be addressed, and I'm not sure you necessarily can do that against Wisconsin. But I like Alabama in a close one.
Well, I'm going to go against the grain here, and I'm going to take the Badgers. The reason why I'm taking the Badgers is, Wisconsin's got, a younger offensive front, but that's basically, offensive line U, and they just always are producing top-notch talent. Their running backs are some of the best in the country every year, it seems. Alabama's defense is, going to come in with the big chip on their shoulder, especially after Ohio State ran all over them. But like Chip said, the big wild card is Alabama's offense. Are they going to be able to do anything against Wisconsin? So I think that if Wisconsin's defense can step up and do the job that they need to do and hold the Crimson Tide at bay, I think that, the Badgers are going to go into this game and come out with a win. All right, I'd like to thank our guest, Dwight Lester of FightingGobbler.com, for joining us today and talking Virginia Tech and joining us for our predictions for the games.
Thanks, guys, for having me. If anybody from this listening, gets down to the game, you can follow me on Twitter. I'll be tweeting shots of our tailgate and everything. You can come find me. We'll have a burger and talk about the game.
Yeah, if you guys want to follow him on Twitter, he's at Hokie, Hokie, HIVP 107.
You are listening to Men in Scarlet and Gray on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V Sporto channel.
All right, so let's talk about some of the things that transpired this last week. And, unfortunately, we don't have Jeremiah on the show with us today. I'd really, really love to discuss this with him. Talk about the firing of Tim Beckman. Go ahead, Chip. I'll let you start off.
Well, all kidding aside, to Jeremiah about Tim Beckman, the listeners may recall that I predicted Tim Beckman to be fired before the end of the season because Illinois' schedule is pretty challenging near the end of the season. So I had, just to kind of refresh everyone's memory, I predicted Tim Beckman to be fired after Illinois was playing Wisconsin on October 24th. I thought that would be kind of where the bottom would fall out. Now that Tim Beckman has been dismissed, when you take a look at the big picture, you take a step back, the whole Illinois program is in a complete state of turmoil because the chancellor and the provost have resigned under pressure. Tim Beckman's been fired. We haven't even discussed the allegations regarding the women's basketball team that injuries were ignored in much the same way that Tim Beckman was accused of mishandling football injuries. So that's leading to speculation that the athletic director, Mike Thomas, that his job is on the line also. So for the listeners, I sent a tweet to Shannon when Tim Beckman's firing was announced, and we were speculating on candidates. And my early candidate that might have interest in the job is Jeff Brom, who's the head coach at Western Kentucky, because Brom's a former Illinois assistant. But until the leadership at the university becomes stable, the chancellor, the provost, maybe a new athletic director, I'm not sure anyone would want to take that job. But looking at Illinois, it's always puzzling to me that a school so close to Chicago and St. Louis cannot be a consistent winner within the Big Ten.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising. I know when I first sent out the tweet, I was joking about the Bo Pelini, but they were really talking about, Jim Tressel coming over there. And I think it was Bleacher Report on satellite radio, and I was listening to it. But the one guy did, the first thing he did was, let's just stop right there, he's still got 2 years that he can't coach. And this is a bad time for Illinois as far as what they're going through to try to get, Tressel. Not that, I don't know if he'd want to get back into coaching or not. Some people are saying he does. Some people are saying he doesn't. I think he might be happy where he's at. But in all honesty, as far as the Bo Pelini, he's got a winning record. Would he rub people the wrong way and have issues? Yes. But it's just, like you said, you're that close to Chicago and you can't have a consistent winner. I mean, right now, Illinois as a whole is just a train wreck. The women's, like you said, women's basketball, the football, it's terrible. And I mean, you hate to see somebody going through, another school in the Big Ten going through it. And I'm hoping that they're going to be one of the teams that maybe at the light at the end of the tunnel is they're going to get a better coach, and maybe they can start recruiting better and get into the upper echelon or just, fighting battles to make the Big Ten better as a whole. We need a lot of other schools to do that, and I'm sick and tired of hearing, everything about like Ohio State's, schedule because, they play in the Big Ten is so easy. Yeah, it's a lot easier than the SEC, but I guarantee in a couple of years we're not going to be sitting there having this discussion.
I agree. I think Illinois needs to until solid, stable leadership is provided across the top of the organization, so to speak, at the top of the university. I think it's going to just kind of continue to flounder, athletically, and it makes it a much more difficult job for anyone to truly express any strong interest in going to Champaign.
I agree, and I think whoever comes in as the run the whole university, I think that they're going to end up cleaning slate as far as the whole black eye, and you might see a new athletic director, and he's going to bring in the coach. So it's going to be interesting to see, and what's the time frame, and how quick they can move on everything, because I think in all honesty that if you go and hire a coach before you hire a president, it's going to change a lot of things. So I see Illinois going through turmoil for the next few years.
The speculation about why it took place now, because keep in mind that the report, the findings haven't been released. It was just the initial findings that were given to Mike Thomas were troubling enough to him to take action on Tim Beckman. So the speculation, I want to emphasize for our listeners that this is purely speculation, is that by firing Tim Beckman now, that it may help Illinois with a potential lawsuit or lawsuits plural if they had held on to Tim Beckman throughout the season. That's purely from a legal speculation standpoint, so I don't want to say that is the case. But already Tim Beckman is plotting legal action against the university. So I think we're in complete agreement. It's a complete turmoil. It's a complete mess. I'm not sure who would possibly want to get involved until after all of those issues, especially the higher leadership has been addressed for the university.
Yeah. The one thing that I didn't understand is when they did the press conference after announcing it, he stood there and said, well, I've had this information in my hand for a couple of days. Well, why did you wait a couple of days? And then, Beckman put out that tweet of, 7 days ago or whatever it was, and an hour later he's fired. It seemed like there was no communication, no nothing. It seems really weird.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the unfortunate Noah Brown injury.
Well, you feel terrible for any young man who gets hurt. I know full well that football is a very physical and violent game. But to be so close to a starting position and to go out and lose that, just a little over a week or 10 days maybe before the opener. I mean, that's devastating. I'm nothing but positive thoughts and well wishes for Noah Brown for a speedy recovery and getting back on the field for 2016. He still has 3 years of eligibility, but the injury is huge for the roster because, in my estimation, Noah Brown was probably the best blocking wide receiver for the Buckeyes. You know, when you think back to last season with Evan Spencer, it was Evan Spencer who made the crucial block that allowed Ezekiel Elliott to have that magical 85-yard run against Alabama. You know, it was Evan Spencer who was named the team MVP by Urban Meyer last season, even though Evan Spencer didn't lead the team in receptions because of that kind of unselfish mindset and mode of play. And I think that's what Noah Brown was going to provide, being a very physical and a very talented wide receiver. So the opportunity now is there for players who are redshirted like Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell. But I'm wondering, and I'm suspicious, if Ohio State does not play Jeff Green, who is a walk-on, who formerly played at Georgia Tech. If Jeff Green doesn't get some opportunity to play, especially against Virginia Tech, a very physical defense, because Jeff Green has a very similar physical frame like Noah Brown. You know, Jeff Green's 6'5", real big, obviously at Georgia Tech, very capable at blocking as a wide receiver, because that's going to be crucial for Ohio State's wide receivers to block, to allow any kind of option plays involving Braxton Miller or Curtis Samuel to flourish against Virginia Tech. That's just my opinion, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jeff Green is seen against Virginia Tech on Monday night.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The thing that I found interesting is that the Urban Meyer press conference on Monday, he mentioned 6 of the wide receivers, and he didn't mention Hill. He didn't mention Green. You know, there's a couple of them that he didn't mention. I mean, granted, he said he might be missing one. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I want to echo what you said as far as speedy recovery, and it's an unfortunate situation, especially when you hear somebody like Eli Apple. You know, I think he was saying during training camp that, Noah Brown was almost uncoverable. You know, they were having a hard time trying to do anything against him as far as, the defensive backs, and he was making major plays on them. So it shows you how, his size and his ability and his physicality and how much he's improved.
You know, we were both in attendance in the spring game, and we saw, the difference that Noah Brown could make. And, I only have, best wishes for, like I said, a speedy recovery and a strong rehabilitation. If there's a positive to this whole thing is in other people on Twitter, I did see that it was a broken bone, not to minimize that, but compared to a torn ACL or, something of that nature, a broken bone, the healing time and the rehabilitation is not nearly as intensive as a torn ACL. Right.
And like you said, with the spring game, sitting there trying, I was talking to another member of the Blogsphere, Blocko Nation, and we're sitting there discussing, who's going to be replacing Evan Spencer and replacing Devin Smith. And all of a sudden we're sitting there discussing it, and here Noah Brown just makes that, one-handed catch that was kind of behind him. And we were like, oh, okay, well, there's one guy that's definitely going to be, making some noise. And unfortunately, we have to, wait a year. And unfortunately for him, he has to go through this. And let's talk about the captains that were named. And I know one of the captains that were, named, it led to speculation that he's going to be the starter under center. Jacoby Bourne and Taylor Decker, the slobs that were voted. Then you had Braxton Miller, Joshua Perry, and Tyvis Powell, and of course, JT Barrett. Was there any surprises to you on this or anything?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily surprises. I mean, Jacoby Bourne, Taylor Decker, Joshua Perry, they've been cited for their strong leadership by Urban Meyer on multiple occasions before the captain vote took place. And I guess I'd throw Braxton Miller in there. The fact that Braxton Miller is now a two-time captain like James Laurinaitis was back in 2007 and 2008. I don't want to call it a surprise. I guess, Tyvis Powell has a reputation within social media as being a jokester. The relationship, the friendship he has with Cardale Jones.
Being his father?
Yeah. Like that's kind of, like it's being a goof, and So obviously his teammates respect him to elect him as a captain. So, that's a positive, and I do believe, you mentioned it, so I'm just going to throw this out there. I do believe JT Barrett being elected a captain kind of leads me to believe it kind of lends some credence to the idea that the players look at JT Barrett maybe as the starter at quarterback. JT Barrett has a strong and exceptional reputation for leadership. It's been there throughout, even before he started actively playing. So this election, it seems to me, it just seems to confirm what's been offered on social media about JT Barrett's reputation for leadership.
Yeah, I agree with the JT Barrett, as far as getting the votes, because I believe it was the first Scarlet and Gray days when they were with Joshua Perry when he was heading to camp. And he talked about how JT Barrett was, a natural leader, and he was more of a leader than Cardale was. But Cardale is a good leader, but he was just talking about that natural thing that JT had, basically.
Right.
My thing, Urban Meyer at his press conference was talking about how he had so many different, the votes were spread out amongst, more people than he's ever had on the team. I think that leads to credence of, or, acceptance of his leadership classes that he's brought to Ohio State, wanting guys to, be leaders. I think it was the 2012 season, his first one. He was sitting there saying that we need guys to step up. We need guys to be leaders. And he's put together this whole program of teaching everybody how to become leaders. And it's really shown, and guys are buying into the system, and it's not just being leaders on the field, but it's being leaders through everything, so they can take it with them in their future. I'm not shocked, by, a couple of slobs getting voted on. I'm definitely not shocked by Braxton Miller. Perry, definitely. I thought, in all honesty, that you would have seen more votes for Darren Lee. You've seen the way that JT Barrett, coming off the field, getting to the defense, like, come on, let's go. And you also seen Lee doing the same thing with the offense. I think Lee is a natural leader, and I was kind of shocked that he didn't get, chosen as one, but it might be because he's, I wouldn't say younger, because him and JT are probably about the same class.
And he has the possibility of being here next year. Now I think Darren Lee is going to go to the pros, but
well, it's funny you mention that, because I just seen Mel Kiper's basically big board right now for linebackers, and he has Joshua Perry at number 5, and he has Darren Lee at number 5, for their positions. So you could see, if both of them leave for next year, well, we'll have to wait for next year, but this is going to be one of the best linebacker corps that Ohio State has seen in a very long time. All right, that's going to do it for us today here on Men in Scarlet and Gray. We hope you enjoyed the show. Just want to remind you to check out all of our stuff on meninscarletandgray.com. Got a bunch of new writers, so be sure to check us out. Also, you can check out Chip's stuff on Athlon Sports and on FromTheMindOfMinnick.com, or my other work on KnowItAllFootball.com. You can follow our show on Twitter at MotSaG Podcast. That's MOTSAG Podcast. Chip is at Chip Minnich, ChipMinich. Myself at SMSummers84, SMSOMMERS84. Also, don't forget to follow Buckeye Sports Radio at Buckeyes Radio. Would like to again thank our wonderful guest, Dwight Lester from FightingGobbler.com, for joining us. You can follow Dwight on Twitter also at Hokie High VP 107. That's HOKIEHI VP 107. For Chip Minnich, I'm Shannon Summers, saying thanks for listening to Men in Scarlet and Gray on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V Sporto channel.